Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
So on this roundtable edition of Where Did the Road Go, I have with me Timothy Renner.
Hello.
And for the first time, Melissa Martell. Hello, Melissa.
Hello.
And we've been talking for a while about having you join us for one of these. You want to tell people a little bit about what you do?
Well,
good phrasing.
well, what in concerns to anything paranormal, I write for a blog called The Curious 14, and pretty much just writing on paranormal events, folklore. There's a couple other writers that write with us, Matt Cook and Andrew Gable, and a couple of other people who sort of guest write, but we all just sort of have our own we manage our own area, and I tend to do like poltergeists and folklore and paranormal events like that. And I've delved a little bit into UFOs when the topic was needed, but other than that, that's the sort of range. And I work also in fitness, and I'm a graphic designer.
Oh, okay. And do you do some of the production on the Folklore podcast too?
I'm the art director for the Folklore podcast, and I do all the graphic design and the website, and so I sort of help co-create it, but Mark's the researcher, and he does the actual podcast. So I'm behind the scenes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that is a podcast about what is it? Folklore?
Yeah, Mark does a lot of research. He's a folklorist, so he's from the UK, and he does a lot of research on certain areas of folklore. So he does 2 shows a month. The first one, it will be him talking about a topic of research, and then the second one, he'll be interviewing a guest in their area of expertise. Let's say they have a book or they have a degree in folklore, they'll talk about their area.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems up your alley, Tim.
Yeah, I've caught a few episodes of that.
All right. So, Melissa, how did you get interested in the paranormal in the first place?
Well, when I was younger, I lived on the east coast of Canada. I live on the west coast right now, and I lived in a old Victorian house that we had some paranormal experiences in. So that started to pique my interest, and I've just always watched ghost movies and books and stuff ever since then. And I've sort of I just came across and made friends with people who were in that, and we just created the Curious 14 and just started doing interests and delving from there with just meet people throughout your life with what you're interested in.
What kind of experiences did you have?
Well, when we were in that house, I was really quite young. I was probably about 6 or 7. It's a long time ago. So it was mostly a lot of other people's experiences. The one that I had and we had continuously was someone walking upstairs continuously. So everyone would be downstairs, and we would hear what sounded like a man with heavy shoes on walking around in a bedroom. But people had all sorts of different experiences, but they weren't my experience, so I can't really say whether or not they're true. But I do know that we would hear quite often this man walking around upstairs, and he was spotted by somebody at one point, so we just assumed made that correlation that it was the same individual.
And what do you think about phenomena like that? Like, where do you think it originates? Do you think it's spirits of the dead, or do you think it's something else?
I don't, I think it depends on the situation. In that scenario, I think it would have been either somebody who had lived there, either an imprint or something repeating itself, or some actual form of intelligence that used to live there. But I don't think it's the case in every scenario. I think it depends on the context of the situation.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And I noticed, if I remember right, you're also into Crowley as well.
Well, I've done a lot of research on Crowley, and I've written stuff on Crowley, but I'm not like a practitioner of the lemur or anything like that. But I've written about him and researched him, and have an interest in his life and what he did concerning magic. And
what stands out to you about him?
well, I think what's really interesting about Crowley is not necessarily just the magic, but the hype that he created, and sort of how he's affected modern culture. Let's say the Beatles and some the philosophy that he put forth is really in modern culture more than ever. I sometimes wonder if he he did a lot of philosophy, but sometimes I don't think he sort of walked the talk necessarily. So I don't really idolize Crowley as an individual. It's more about his philosophy and what he put forth. So I think he didn't necessarily practice that, but he did certainly have an influence on modern culture.
Oh yeah.
My impression of Crowley has always been that for as much as he was interested in delving into these topics, he was most interested in being seen as the great beast.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, he went on quite a bit about destroying the ego and so on and so forth, where his was just as big as it could be.
Well, yeah, and I mean, he was so against strict religious upbringing because that's how he was raised. That he went the other extreme, but the other extreme, it's almost like they're both at two ends of, two extremes. They almost in a circle meet at the same. They almost connect and meet at the same point. They're so extreme.
Yeah. Well, that's what usually happens.
Yes.
I forgot what I was just going to say about him. It wasn't just the extreme, it was the I'm blanking out. Great. Never mind. But he had created a I like the way he created his magical system, kind of trying to inject a scientific ideal of, repeating things. And what did he always say? The aim of religion and with the methods of science.
The aims of religion were the methods of science?
No. He would say using the methods of science to achieve the aim of religion.
Okay.
So like he would apply scientific thinking to spirituality.
That's interesting. I think you see that in a lot of spirituality even today. That sort of influence.
Yeah, and he had a very libertarian mindset. That's what I was going to say. He had a very libertarian mindset, and he was very sexually deviant for the time, which is not so much now because he was bisexual and so on and so forth, and very, very much pushed the ideas of sex magic and stuff like that in a time where that was simply not okay and illegal in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly pushing the envelope with a lot of things in those times, but I see him in that way, but then I also see him as somebody who's because you see these arguments, especially in Facebook groups, as to whether Crowley was like a bigot or whether he was against racism, and you can find examples of both. So it's like he was pushing that element, but he also was, raised in a society where that was, the norm. So he's got those two elements going on. Yeah.
And it's interesting, the influence of people like Crowley or like Lovecraft, who at the time didn't have the impact that they're having now on our culture.
Yeah, it's like that's interesting because it's like they are before their time.
Yeah. And the impact in our culture of both of them is just astounding when you stand back and look at it. Like, I don't think the average person realizes just how much of popular horror fiction stuff is taken from Lovecraft.
Right.
And how much of an effect Crowley had across so many different veins of our culture, not just one. As you said, I mean, obviously he influenced tons of music.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing too is like, I mean, when the means of communications have changed, and all it takes is for each generation to rediscover these things again. I mean, the works are there, and
Hmm.
you can have a hype with them, like say with the Beatles, and then it dies out, and then another generation doesn't realize that, you know, Crowley exists, and they rediscover him, and the means of communications are so vast now that I can see why it's, you know, widespread more than it would have been even 30 years ago,
And
and that there's less of a taboo about, you know, buying a deck of his tarot cards.
yeah, yeah, or any tarot cards.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have friends who, you know, they tell fortunes, and if I ever suggest anything Crowley, they still believe that he's, you know, the devil and evil, and stay away from his tarot cards.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
interesting. Whereas I don't see them as any different from any other deck in that vein.
Right. I mean, he redid them to match up to the Kabbalah and other
Yeah,
correspondences a bit, but I mean, they're still just tarot cards.
exactly.
But yeah, I've met Wiccans who are very anti-Crowley, and I'm always kind of like, he had something to do with the formation of the whole Wiccan thing, right? And they're like, no, he didn't. And it's like, okay,
Well, yeah, I guess they'll say that because Gerald Gardner wasn't really a fan of
yeah,
of Crowley, but he still would have been at that time. Actually, it was before, and he would have been influencing everything
Gerald,
before Wicca.
there's a really interesting story, and I'll have to research it more because it's been too many years since I've read it, and I'm too rusty on it. But Alston Spare, who's an artist who was involved in the occult scene back in the Crowley days, Gardner at some point went to Alston Spare and fostered this sort of weird, like, magical battle between I think Crowley suspected Gardner of going to Alston Spare to do this black magic, against Crowley and stuff. There was this really interesting story of this magical battle with Gardner in the middle and Spare on one side and Crowley on the other.
yeah. I remember something about that.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, Spare's an interesting figure himself.
Yeah, I mean, Spare's another guy here's somebody who, died destitute. He would sell his beautiful artwork, in pubs and stuff. At the time, he was completely unknown, and now, I mean, he's not a household name like Crowley or Lovecraft, but certainly tons of people know his name now. Where during his lifetime, he would have been completely obscure.
Yeah, I hadn't actually even had any familiarity with him until I had read Kenneth Grant's. I think it was a Magical Revival because he deals with Crowley, Spare, and Dion Fortune.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, well, this is really interesting. And then, it's not, at the time, you couldn't really find Spare stuff because this was pre-internet. I mean, so,
Right.
and as it is, Grant's books cost me something like $60 at the time, and that was like, 90, 91, something like that. Now they go for like $1,000.
Yeah, I
Wow.
sold my Kenneth Grant books, and I made a good bit of money on those.
I bet.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I just couldn't resist.
I don't blame you.
I needed the income,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
but I
Well,
still have my Spare collection.
I mean, occult books and like folk horror and occults is really big right now. I don't know how long, if this has staying power, but it's like I'm seeing it everywhere and in abundance, and I think that's why the podcast, like the Folklore podcast, is doing so well and prevalent, because people just have a thirst for this type of stuff.
I was also hoping to have Joshua on with us because Joshua's very into the whole fairy faith type of thing, and I see that as part of the folklore thing and part of the whole revival. Like people are really fascinated by this type of stuff now.
So, so my riff on
Yeah.
folklore is this, and I've been chastising people when they use it on my podcast as the same thing as fiction, and I've been going on that folklore and fiction are not necessarily the same thing. They can be, but they're not always.
Exactly.
And my riff on folklore is that what it does is it connects us to the earth, and I think that's what people are really missing, and that's what they're seeking now. A lot of people don't go out into the woods and just lose themselves, or they don't have that connection with the seasons. They're not tending crops. They're not, just out. They don't feel the impact of the seasons unless there's a major weather event, a hurricane or a blizzard or something.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily have like a graveyard to go to and visit the ancestors, are not necessarily connected to their past and all the generations like you would have if you had lived your entire life in a tiny village and all the generations past had.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real longing to sort of reconnect with the earth and reconnect to the places where you live. And I've really been recommending to people, like, even if you didn't grow up there, dig into the folklore where you live and you'll find some great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the podcast that we do, a lot of it's, I mean, we're a lot of it's UK folklore because Mark is from the UK, but I mean, he branches out, he tries to get a lot of topics, and like he just did one on mermaids, so he's trying to give, Slavic folklore, North American folklore, and from different countries, and of course, United Kingdom, but it's there's just so much from all over the world, and with the internet, everybody can listen in from so many different countries that it's just really amazing to watch and see how people are connecting with it on the internet, even though it's not going outside into the woods necessarily.
Right. But I think there's that longing for it, and folklore is filling some of that void.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about, and this applies to folk tales, to folk songs, to storytelling, even urban legends, is they can go across cultures, and you'll find these thematic similarities from the folk songs in England. Me as a folk singer, I see it there most often.
Yeah.
The folk songs in England, they'll be completely echoed. If they're not the exact same songs, they'll be echoes of them in the folk songs in America. Even going into Europe, though, the folk tales, the stories, the songs, you'll find these common threads that run through them, which I just find incredibly interesting.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things you got to ask is, why are there common threads in
Right.
areas that might be very different? And that's where I think you get the fact that some of these things have truth to them underneath all the sort of local color, the stuff that's been added later on.
Right. Yep.
What were some of the more recent things you had written about, Melissa?
Oh, geez. It's been a couple of months. I've been on a bit of a summer break and working a lot, so I don't even have it pulled up in front of me. I haven't checked. I actually published, it wasn't my article. I'd written a couple of things on Crowley, but I also had written something about the Amityville Horror. And whether or not, I didn't really go into, whether or not it was true or not. I was just analyzing the people involved and, what each individual said. I mean, it's for the most part accepted to be a hoax, but of course the people involved, the Lutzes, claimed till the day they died it wasn't. So I wrote about that. It seemed to be rather popular, but I got that, and I always found it interesting whether or not it was a hoax or whether or not they were telling the truth, at least according to what they believed.
Yeah, well, the problem is the minute you get the Warrens involved in something,
oh yes,
it becomes very, very sketchy, because
it does.
They were out to make money off of this stuff, and that was that.
Of course. And that's one of the things we'd also written about the Enfield poltergeist, because in the UK people are really touchy about that subject, especially the Conjuring movies, because it was English investigators that were involved, and so they always sort of try to take the claim for that case, and they weren't ever really involved, so they sort of like to show up at little hot spots as you were and get involved, from a promotional standpoint.
Yeah, and I think the main investigator on that case said Ed Warren had like shown up one day and was kind of like, "Hey, I know how you can make a lot of money with this," and he was like, "Go away."
Oof.
Go away. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and ironically, The Conjuring 2 has a lawsuit against them right now, or
does
Warner, the studio who made it. They've the guy who wrote the original book
Mm-hmm.
on one of the cases. He had written it for the Warrens, or wrote it with them, or it was with his
Yeah,
publisher. I don't remember the exact details,
I
but
think he wrote it for the Warrens.
yes. So he wrote it, but when the studio, is it Warner Brothers? They
I
went
don't
to
know.
Lorraine Warren and asked her permission. She gave permission to do the movie, but apparently he has the rights. And they're trying to counter-argue, saying you don't have the rights to somebody's life story. And then he's trying to counter-argue, saying, well, it's not a life story, it's fiction. So they
Right.
have a big lawsuit because they went to the wrong person for permission to make those Conjuring movies.
I also noticed in The Conjuring 2 that, the Warrens were doing the stuff that the actual UK investigators did. Like they just kind of replaced them with the Warrens being in that role, and it's kind of like they didn't do this. Like it actually makes me angry when I watched it.
Yeah, yep. I know every person I know that's either involved in folklore or paranormal or interested in the UK refuses to see it.
Now they
Yeah.
they did a good mini series on the Enfield haunting on BBC.
It was great. It was actually pretty good, yeah.
I was very pleased with that, and I kind of was like, I don't want to watch The Conjuring. I'm one of those people who didn't like The Conjuring. Everyone was like,
Yeah.
this is the scariest movie ever, and I thought, yeah, it was
No.
okay.
Yeah,
It wasn't. I didn't know
filled
what
with-
people were freaking out about.
Yeah, it's just another one it's filled with jump scares, as my son would say. It's just, all loud music, and it's just trying to yeah, pretty much. I mean, the scariest thing about The Conjuring 2, I think, was that strange nun specter thing that they
Yes,
had going on
yeah.
here. And I mean, that's not even part of the story, so.
Yeah, it looks like they're trying to do some like story arc over the course of the movies revolving around the Warrens.
Yep.
And I
Pretty
also
much.
I also noticed that the woman who actually lived in the house in the first Conjuring had said that none of the stuff in the movie happened. Like she literally said
Yeah.
there was nothing in that entire movie that was true, but she was okay with it because it captured a little bit of how frightening it was to be there. Whereas Lorraine Warren said, no, that was exactly how everything happened. And it's like, okay, do you not remember, or are you just full of crap?
Well, it's hard to believe that that's exactly how it happened. I mean, it's like when people say the Ouija board crawled across the floor. It's really hard to believe, like, something so outlandish. I mean, you have to have some pretty impressive evidence when you're saying something that's some outlandish story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
And there's so little paranormal proof,
yeah.
That's what
Well,
makes it so hard to
Like,
research.
here's, one of the things that is about the Amityville Horror is it's always said that it's a hoax, because a lot of the things they declared, like full moons and weather patterns and storms, just didn't happen.
Right.
You can go back and check the records. And so the counter argument to that is, and I in my article, I don't say whether it's right or wrong. I sort of just detail it. And the counter argument to that is that they were sort of having almost like I can't remember the word that Lorraine used for it, but it's almost like they're seeing things psychically, as a psychic would. So they're having this almost like you would call it a hallucination, but they're seeing the evil that's really there that other people can't see because they're in tune to it. And that seemed a little flaky. But
Yes.
I don't say that in the article. I keep it very neutral, like this person claimed this person claimed this. So, but that seemed a little, I mean, that's too easy of an explanation.
I've
You
actually
could say that
started
for anything.
I've started to wonder lately about something, though. And in regards to UFO sightings, I'm going to use Bigfoot as an example because that's who I am, and so forth, all of this. But for instance, could there be an overlay element? In other words, some guy's in the woods, he thinks he sees Bigfoot. An investigator or someone goes out and by one way or another proves it was a bear. Could it not have been both? In other words, could there have been an overlay where this fellow really did, in his mind or in reality in some odd way, see a Bigfoot, but it was a bear. You know, like, is there
Yeah.
any? Am I being
This
clear with that?
This is
You've clearly been reading the demonic reality from Patrick Harper.
Yeah.
this sounds like create your own reality, sort of quantum physics or something.
Well,
Well, I mean,
Harper
We
makes some
collapsed
really good.
reality.
He makes some really good points about just um, imagination and just not crushing witnesses and so forth, which really kind of hit home with me. That book has, and Soraya, to your credit, you said it would change the way I looked at all of this, and it absolutely has.
yeah, it does that to everyone as long as they understand it.
Well, you know what I find interesting? I mean, that's really interesting of a concept. I think when it comes into question is when someone's trying to make a whole lot of money from it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the Warrens. But I mean, like, we did like a podcast on fairies, and I was getting off on a tangent, but there's lots of people who still today claim modern sightings of fairies, and they're scared to tell anybody. But in their minds, they've really, truly seen fairies, and they don't tell anybody because they're scared of being judged. But and
Yeah.
it's a common sighting in the UK.
Oh, absolutely.
Or well, probably more, maybe not common, but more common than you would think.
Yeah.
So and they swear, but they're not trying to make, tens of thousands of dollars investigate or millions of dollars selling
Sure.
books either.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's all connected into whatever the core of the phenomena is. Someone will see, if they're big into like UFOs, they're going to see a UFO. But if they're more traditional, maybe they encounter fairies instead.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
The thing kind of gets its face from what the person's belief system is, what they're going to see it as, because they can't process it. Like it's something that they have no face for. So. And then they don't want to tell anyone because they know it sounds crazy.
Well, I mean, if I had seen Bigfoot, like, I mean, I live on Vancouver Island. It's known as Ape Island because apparently there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings, or Sasquatch as they call it here. If I'd seen it, I wouldn't want to tell anybody because I would think I was crazy. Because when somebody tells me that, I sort of roll my eyes at first, like, okay. It's just the natural skeptical. I mean, I think it's natural to have your guard up and be skeptical, or at least question something. So I would definitely be like, oh God, everybody's going to question me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think questioning is very important. I mean, because some people, they'll tell you they had this weird experience, and then you talk to them about it, and you realize it wasn't that weird of an experience. Like you can go to what was the ghost hunting show, Paranormal State.
Oh.
Which I thought was absolutely terrible. I know a lot of people really liked it, but I could not watch it. And I watched one episode.
Was that with that Ryan Buell
Yes.
guy? Okay, now I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, and they did one episode where they were like sitting outside in a ditch because apparently the ditch was demon haunted or something. And I'm like, what? And they're sitting there, and suddenly they start hearing weird noises, and they start recording it. They're like, oh my God, do you hear this? And they're like freaking out. And I'm sitting here going, it's coyotes. That's what coyotes sound like. And they actually left it in, and they took it to like someone to check out. They're like, we recorded this, and the guy goes, it's coyotes. And they're going, that's what coyotes sound like? But if you didn't know that, and you're walking through the woods and you hear that, you're going to be going, what the hell is that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess it shows how disconnected we are from nature, or
Well,
some
that
of
too.
us are. Some of us are. I mean, you knew it was coyotes.
Yeah, I knew it was. I have coyotes all over here, and even so, sometimes I'll walk outside and be like, "What the hell is that?" No, it's got to be a coyote, because they make the weirdest damn sounds, and
Yeah.
They sound creepy. They really do. It sounds, like some kind of monster is out there making some kind of strange
Well,
speaking sound.
and this may have been, someone may have mentioned this many of times before, but like shows like Paranormal State or Ghost Hunters, or they're trying to hype it up, and it's always, they always have to be sitting in the dark, like as if that's where all the paranormal experiences happen, is when someone's sitting in the dark, and as if nobody's just standing around, I don't know, washing the dishes in the middle of the daytime and something happens that they can't explain.
Yeah, well, it's definitely the creep factor. It looks scary if it's in, night vision.
But you also can't see what it really is.
Yes, yeah. Although I do think there is something to the dark. I think that, and I don't know if it's maybe that these things can
Mhm.
manifest a little easier when it's night, or it's the way our brains interpret things
Right.
because it's night. We're not expecting. I don't know. Like I
Well,
want to say, it puts us more in the mood to be open to this type of stuff.
right. But all my any experiences I ever had were totally unexpected in broad daylight.
Really.
I never had an experience when it was nighttime. If I've gotten creeped out at the nighttime, it's my imagination. But no, three experiences that I've had in my life, including the footsteps in the house that I lived in when we were younger, were in like middle of the afternoon when you weren't even expecting it. So I've never had an experience when it was dark. So I always got that. I was right away like, well, it must be for dramatic effect.
I've had both. I've definitely had both. And Tim, what about your experience in the woods there with the sense of the thing that seemed like it was going to turn into a Bigfoot encounter? That was during the day, right?
That was during the day, and I was going to say, a fellow named Dr. Johnson wrote a book that's not widely available. It's called The Bigfoot Phenomenon in Pennsylvania. It's an excellent book, but he breaks down the data, at least in Pennsylvania sightings, and you'll hear this a lot. And again, the Bigfoot shows, they're always with the night vision, cameras out in the
Yeah.
woods. And you'll hear that, oh, these are nocturnal creatures and so forth. But I think it was like 51 or 52% of all the sightings were daytime sightings. He had broken down the data. So you're just as likely to see him night or day, or
Right.
unlikely. It's
Right.
however you want to look
Yeah.
at that. So yeah,
It's an
I
even
tend to
spread.
agree. You don't need nighttime, but I also agree with that. It does it opens some part of you. There's when I'm out at night, it could be just a total natural human reaction, but I feel like my senses are heightened. Um,
Hmm.
because my vision, your vision is so limited, I feel like everything else is just fired up. So maybe that does
The
make you more open.
the one thing I noticed is in each instance, even if it was the daytime, and maybe this is why some people feel like this at nighttime, is you get into more, if you're more of a relaxed and you're not busy and your mind's not working and you're not focusing on things, like each time that I experienced, I was in more of a relaxed state where my mind wasn't filled with tons of thoughts and doing stuff and busy. So maybe I was more open to perceiving that, even though it was the day. So perhaps like maybe at night you might be, your thoughts might be slowing down because it's getting darker, and you might be in more of a receptive, relaxed zone,
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
possibly.
so can we get you to talk about your other couple of experiences?
Oh, well, I'll mention the one I had. I don't know if I've heard this is a really common experience where you have like it's when someone dies and they visit you, either before, immediate, or after they die. But I've also heard a lot from people about pets when they've had pets pass away, that pets have come back. And I always thought it was really silly, and I never
Hmm.
really gave it much thought. And I had a cat for like 19 years, and she was really ill, so we put her down. And then I was married at the time, and the first couple of weeks after we put her down, my now ex-husband he would come up to me and say, this is really weird, but I keep hearing the cat walking down the hallway, and I'm like, you're just used to the cat walking down the hallway. That's
Right.
rational explanation. We've had her for so long, we're just used to her doing that. And then I start to hear her digging in her cat litter, and I'm like, you're just yeah. And I was like, whatever. And he kept coming up to me saying, no, I'm pretty sure. He's like, I literally stepped to the side to walk past the cat, but then I realized she wasn't there, but I swear she was there. And I once again, I just said, we're just so used to the cat being there that our brains are kind of tricking us. And then one day, we were up really early. He was going out of town, and I had the day off, so I went back to lay back in bed. And I was laying there, and I put my hand on the pillow to go back to bed, and all of a sudden, and I was still awake, so I wasn't asleep yet, I felt this tingling sensation of something which felt like the cat walking across my head on the pillow, which is what she did every night. Like, she would come on the bed, walk across your head on the pillow, and it felt like this really weird cold tingling sensation that went through my head, but it felt like paws walking across my head. And I jumped up out of bed and I went, what? I'm really losing it. And I laid back down, and then it came the other way and walked across the other way, which is what the cat would do. She'd walk one way and then the other way across your head. But it was like this really cold, weird, tingling feeling, and it wasn't on the surface. It felt like it went right through my entire face, and I just jumped out of bed. And then I was convinced. I'm like, okay, the cat is around to letting us know something. And then that was it. We never, after that instance, never heard any sounds. It was like she was trying to get my attention and saying, bye. Like, I recognize it. And that made me go, whoa. And that was it. We never heard any noises, saw the cat in the hallway, never felt anything again. She was just gone. And that was probably 2 weeks, and we'd had her for 19 years.
Wow.
So that was like 2 weeks after it. And then we never heard or saw anything again. So that was the strangest experience I think I've ever had. Is a cat of all things, a cat. But she was very, like, it was part of our family.
Yeah.
She was part of our family.
I've
been around for a long time.
I've had that happen with a couple of dogs, actually. The one who we never took for rides because he was way too uncontrollable. He was a large white boxer.
Mm-hmm.
When we finally had to put him to sleep, like the next day, I felt like he was riding with us in the back seat, and I didn't say anything. And my girlfriend at the time goes, "I feel like the dog is in the back seat." And I went, "Okay, that's interesting," because I do too, and I wasn't saying a word. I mean, there was just this strong presence of him there, and that was it. There was nothing else with him. But the one we just put down, so we didn't have this dog very long, but she was like the best dog we've ever had. Just an amazing dog. It was a rough collie, and it was really hard to put her to sleep. But she was way older than most rough collies get to be.
Mm-hmm.
And right after burying her, I kind of got the sense that she was like running around me, and I'm thinking, okay, you seem like a puppy. It's probably in my head. And I came inside and I sat down, and I felt like she was all over the room, like not in one spot, but like just spread across the entire room.
Wow.
And when my ex came in, she's like, I feel like the dog's here, but she's all over the room. And I went, okay, all right, that's interesting. And we were watching. I think we were watching Twin Peaks, the new one, and I kind of felt like the dog was laying where the dog usually laid, in front of the couch, and the cat liked the dog, but the one cat would always give the dog this look, like she would walk into the room. If the dog was laying on the floor, she'd give him this look and then walk away. And so I'm like, okay, now it feels like the dog has crawled closer to us, like it does. And then the cat walked straight over to me, suddenly stopped, looked at the space I was referring to, gave it the look it would normally give the dog, turned around and walked away. And my ex just started to cry. Because I'm like, yep, that was some kind of confirmation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because the cat never does that. It only did it to the dog.
Wow. And it's funny that you have that confirmation experience, because when who is now my ex kept saying that he would have never believed in this stuff, he's very logical. And it's the fact that he was coming up to me first and saying this, I mean, I should have been more like, wow, there's something here. I'm the one who fluffed it off. And I'm more likely to believe in the paranormal than he was, but he was really, it was really a real experience for him. So it's interesting when you can have couples do that confirmation.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, the cat, who never used to lay on the floor in this room, now lays where the dog did all the time.
Wow.
And it's just like, did you pick up a little of the dog? Is this like, what are you doing?
So someone
How
called
long
me.
ago was that? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We put her to sleep back in May.
Oh.
So just a few months ago.
So someone called me with a ghost cat story. I don't know if it fits in here or not. You want to hear it?
Go for it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so this guy calls me out of nowhere, and because I've done all this research on the Toad Road mystery, he's a guy who used to live here. He used to visit Toad Road all the time, and he called me with this like mystery, this little bit of information that he had about the original gate that went to the doctor's house that was there. It was very, very interesting. It was, he just said, it gave me a word that was on the gate. He said, I distinctly remember this word that says Harbeth on it. He's like, what could that mean? I said, well, I don't know. Was it the maker of the gate or what? And he's kind of giving me guff. He's an older guy, and he's calling me from Florida. He's like, well, what do you know? You know, you're not a very good detective. I thought you were the expert on this stuff. And so I said, well, let me look into it. You know, I'll see what I can find. Within minutes of hanging up the phone, I went, Harbeth, wait a minute. The doctor's name was Harold, and his first wife's name was Lisbeth. It's just a combination of their name. It's Harold and Lisbeth. So I called him back the next day, and he gave me proper due. He's like, okay, you're pretty good at this stuff. But then he goes, you don't believe any of that nonsense that, you know, with ghosts and monsters back there, do you? And I said, well, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of witness reports, and you know, he's coming off pretty skeptical. And then he goes into telling me this tale. You know, basically he's saying this, it's all nonsense. There's no such thing as that. But one night I was in my house, and or I think he was in his vacation place. I think that he said, and he said in the middle of the night, he said, you know, we didn't have cats. We never had, you know, there wasn't a cat in there. There was, the doors weren't open, the windows wasn't. This cat hops up on the bed, and he said, you know, I woke up and I'm petting him, and my wife woke up and she's like, you know, what's that? And he's like, well, I don't know. And he's like talking to the cat and saying, you know, how'd you get in here? And goes back to sleep. And in the morning they wake up and there's no cat, and you know, no holes in screens, no evidence of a cat ever being there. So here's a guy who was this you know, this very hard skeptic who's telling me, you know, this stuff doesn't exist. That's all silly. And then he goes into this crazy cat story.
That happens a lot, though.
I was about to say the same thing.
You get the people who are like, no, this stuff doesn't happen. And they're like, but there was this one time.
Right.
Even
And
that. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say,
No.
even the skeptic, Michael Sherman, has a story, you know, about on his wedding. I don't know if it, but they'll have a story, but then they sort of divert right back to standard skepticism.
Yeah. Well, it's a dogma. It's, you know, they're not looking at the evidence. They have a belief.
Well, my wife is the biggest skeptic I know, which is great. I think she it's very good to have that check around me, because I'm the first guy to follow the fairies off into the forest. You know, so I need to have someone there to check that.
Grounded.
And she had a very, very typical experience with the what they call the lumberjack man or the red shirt man.
I'm not familiar with that one.
No, me neither.
Basically, it's a people wake up, they'll see a guy in a red checkered shirt, like just standing over their bed, kind of thing. It's an entity that people have seen, or at least it's a image that lots of people have seen. I don't know if it's an entity or a collective unconscious thing or what it is, but she sees this this thing that a million other people have seen, and she's just it was just it was just waking up from a dream, it was nothing, just completely. And I was like, but lots of other people have seen this same thing. Nope, just a dream.
Well, some people I think need to think that. Like, I've met people who are so freaked out by this type of stuff where if you start to talk, they don't even want to talk about it. They're like, nope, this stuff doesn't happen. It's like, no, but you gotta, they're like, no, this stuff doesn't happen. Let's change the subject,
Like, it's almost, is there harm in talking about it? What's the harm in even mentioning it if it doesn't exist?
Well, I think they say it doesn't exist because deep down they know there might be something to it, and the idea that something that they can't comprehend might exist freaks them out. And I think that's where a lot of these very close-minded skeptics, who aren't really skeptics, they're more debunkers and true believers, really. But I think this, the idea that there's stuff out there that we can't even begin to comprehend really kind of freaks them out. So they have to create this barrier. I remember there was a quote from Freud talking to Jung when Jung was looking into all his stuff on UFOs and the paranormal and stuff like that, and coming up with the collective consciousness. And Freud literally told him, no, we have to, stick with the sexuality stuff. And I forget the exact quote, but it was something like to put up a barrier, a bulwark against the paranormal and the occult.
Yeah, Freud was very against him going into that. That was the major split, I think, between those two.
Yeah.
Yes.
My wife, to her credit, is very Jungian in her approach to this. She just thinks we're all crazy. But she did this wonderful, I'm trying to get her to come on Strange Familiars to do this on air. She did this wonderful Jungian breakdown of the Bigfoot phenomenon in general and me in particular that it literally floored me the other week. It was just fantastic. And her she's saying everyone gets what they want out of the phenomenon. It's, the guys that are, tend to be the more redneck types are out in the woods. They're drinking beer with their buddies. They got their guns. They're, to them it's a natural creature, and they're out there, and they're, they're hunting this creature, and it becomes a gun control thing. Where there was a program recently that had a guy who said he shot one, and she said, for that guy it was a gun control thing. Nobody's going to tell him what to do with his guns. And she's for you, she, pointed at me, and she's like, it's just like you with your belief in Mary, where you've come to this point where you said you don't care if she's real or not. Mary works for you. So the Blessed Virgin Mary, I'm talking about.
Right.
So we're all
doesn't matter if
projecting our needs onto these phenomena.
Yeah, that's her idea. She said, you just say, you don't care if Mary's a representation of the goddess or she was a real person, or it just doesn't matter because it works for you. I said, yeah, that's true. She said, it's the same thing with Bigfoot. She says, you're out there looking for the spirit of the woods. And it just hit me. Like, she said, it doesn't matter to you whether it's real or not. You're just out there and it really floored me. It was really this kind of deep, kind of Jungian cut to the whole thing. I don't know if I 100% agree with it, but it was, she certainly impressed me.
I suppose for some people who like things that are more, concretized, that it is important that it's real and not just their projection, real. Right? Or not real, like it's black or white and cut or dry for them.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get into some. It's the ufologist trying to impress the scientist. Every ufologist really wants to be a scientist. They want to be accepted by science. It's never going to happen. It's the same thing with the Bigfoot crowd. They want to be they want this animal to be accepted as a real animal. They want to be considered legit. So they break down these, come up with these crazy, reasons why footprints, disappear in the middle of or rather trackways stop in the middle of a field, or why people think they see them disappear, but they didn't really see them disappear, even though, tons of witnesses say it just disappeared right from, no, you didn't really see that. And they'll start telling witnesses what they saw because they're so desperate to be accepted by science, it's never going to happen. No. Science will never accept this stuff.
Well, unless you can bring a carcass of Bigfoot right to them on this lab. Right?
Yeah, don't hold your breath.
Very early on the show, I had on Brian Forrester, and like him or not, he kind of struck me with one statement because I said something about, what's it going to take for archaeologists to take some of this stuff, that he and Graham Hancock and people like that were trying to present seriously, and he just kind of went, I don't care.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care what they think. He's like, I'm doing my work, and that's that. And they can do whatever they want. He's like, I don't need their acceptance. I think that upset some people when he said that. But I'm thinking, no, that's exactly how you should be with this. Because if you're looking for acceptance, you're not getting it.
No, it's not forthcoming. Disclosure is not forthcoming. I'm sorry, everybody.
And that was dealing with ancient mysteries. And I mean, some of that stuff is slowly working its way into the mainstream. I think it's been 20 years since Graham Hancock wrote Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah.
And there's some of the stuff he wrote in there that now people are saying, like mainstream archaeology is kind of looking at, not like on their own. They've kind of reached the same conclusions, but Graham was there 20 years ago and they were attacking him for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, like you say, a lot of these archaeologists or whatnot have built their entire career on their their field and their information. If they're going to change direction, it could mean they're out of a job or out of funding or out of money, and a lot of areas in science, if it's connected to corporations, there's a lot of money involved, and we know that money can be a very influential power in what people decide to reveal or what routes they decide to go, or if they go rogue, or do they just follow what the standard storyline is.
And that's the thing. You need the money. You need the money for support. You can't just say, okay, let's try this and see if it works. Oh, no results. Well, we still have funding. Let's do something else. If you don't get results, you don't get more funding.
Exactly.
And everyone knows they're not revealing Bigfoot because it would hurt the logging industry if they revealed it's true.
That's it.
I've heard so many people say that, and I just, okay. All right.
The logging industry's already taken a kicking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nice theory.
It's all Bigfoot's fault.
It is.
Climate change, totally Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, he causes hurricanes too.
when he flies around in his UFO.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
Yeah. There we go. Going back to ghost cats. I've had, and I don't know what, we've had a number of cats, but I don't know what to connect this to, but for years I've felt cats jump on my bed. Like, as I lay down to go to sleep. Before I'm actually starting to go to sleep, I'll turn the lights off and suddenly I'll feel a cat jump on the bed. And I usually don't let the cats in this part of the house when I'm sleeping because they have a tendency to wake me up and I have trouble getting back to sleep. So I'll be like, did I leave a cat in here? And I'll turn the light on, there'll be no cat. And I could feel it walking. I could feel the bed shake when they jumped up, and I'm just like, okay, ghost cat. There we go.
I wonder if there's something to it, like what do they call the phantom cell phone thing, like the vibrate, where people feel their cell phone vibrate in their pocket, but it's it's across the room or.
But that's because you feel it so often, and this was not something I normally felt because, as I said, I don't normally leave the cats in this part of the house when I go to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't like something that happened all the time that my body might have been remembering.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It's something that's happened very rarely.
Not a sense memory, in other words. It was,
Right.
Yeah.
And it literally just feels like something real. Lately, I keep getting the. What has happened? I don't know what I talked about on air and what I didn't. Like on the eclipse, did I talk? Have you listened to the most recent shows, Tim?
I haven't.
I don't.
I've listened to the one that was. I haven't listened to the patron expanded one yet. I've listened to the one that was released to the regular audience.
Did we talk about the eclipse?
I don't remember. I don't think so in the first half.
Okay, so
but maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know I talked to Jeff about it, but I don't remember if we were on air or not. But on the day of the eclipse, I wasn't feeling good, so I spent most of the day in bed. I just, for whatever reason, was just feeling crappy. And it hit about 6:30, and I went, I really need to get up. And I was awake. I just didn't want to get out of bed because I still didn't feel very good. And in my right ear, which was the ear on the pillow, I just get, "Come here."
Oh.
And I went, okay, haven't heard that voice before. And then I'm thinking, where am I supposed to go? And then I'm thinking, why doesn't this stuff freak me out? Because that should freak me out. That was a pretty creepy voice. And then, like, what day was it? A couple days ago, I think it was. I was laying there, and I think I was just starting to doze off, so I was thinking it was probably hypnagogic. But I heard very distinctly someone go, "Shh." And I went, okay, there's no one around. And I'm like, I better get up and make sure there's nobody in the house.
That's creepy stuff.
Yeah, which there wasn't. And I realized, the noise being sort of a disembodied thing doesn't freak me out. But the idea of someone, like a physical person in the house is concerning, you know?
Yeah, much more terrifying.
I wonder if it's I was out at this place that we are calling Site 7 because we don't want to give it away where we've been having this weird activity, and we'd been out there at night several times, and it's fine. We're just recording sounds and seeing what we could see. But one night we were out there. I was with James, the new Strange Familiars co-host guy, and I kept saying to him, James, something's freaking me out tonight. Like I don't feel right, and he's like, well, what do you think it is? I said, I don't know. I don't. I said, I'm getting just weird vibes. I was getting like creeped out. I said, this isn't like a Squatch thing. I don't feel like. I said, I think it's people. I feel like there's people around, and it was only later that we kind of forgot about this, and about, I don't know, I'm guessing 40 minutes or so goes by, and we started to see lights in the woods. I'm like, whoa, what's that? And then we hear voices. So okay, it's people in the woods. So you kind of waited, and this group of kids came out of the woods. They just were back in there doing what kids do. Mm-hmm. But it was only later that he said, you realize that you were talking about people. You said you felt that there was people around. I said, oh, I didn't even think about that. But he's like, you were picking up on that there were people around, which in a way creeped me out way more. I was way more creeped out that night than any other. And of course, they ended up being teenagers, nothing to worry about. But
why not? Right. Why shouldn't we be able to pick up on other people in the environment? Animals can pick up on us long before. You could be in the woods and a cougar could be watching you for 20 minutes before you even know they're there. They've got good perception. So I guess if you're in that right state, why shouldn't you be able to pick up? I don't know exactly how it happens, if it's scent or whatnot. For dogs and cats, obviously they can smell things and see things better than we can. But when we can pick up on something extra long before it happens, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to with some sort of intuition or other sense.
I would also say that if you were in an area where there was some odd energy going on, maybe they were disrupting it, and that's what you were picking up.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
That's true.
Could be.
Because they may not have noticed it was weird energy because they're just out there doing as you said, what teenagers do.
It was.
And
yeah, I just and I questioned them too when it was once they came out, we scared the heck out of them, but unintentionally.
Well, yeah.
But we're like, hey, you guys see anything weird? And they're like, no, nothing weird. And then they said, except that drone you were flying over our heads. I said, we don't have a drone. So that was the only, but they were like, nah, there's nothing weird back there. We've never, that kind of thing. But then they did say, it's like, there was that drone you were flying over our head. I was like, whoa, no, we don't have a drone. So.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that part of it. Yeah. Huh. Ghost drone.
Ghost drone.
I was trying to think what the other thing the other thing that happens to me a lot, and it's been happening for quite a while, is I hear fabric moving when I turn off my lights.
Fabric.
And again, this is a dark thing. And because it's such a subtle sound, but that sound like someone maybe like if you had a blanket and you were moving the blanket, that has that sound of fabric on fabric, and it's a very distinct sound. And I won't be moving. Nothing in the room should be moving. And it'll be like, why is there fabric moving? And I'll turn the light on and it'll stop. And I'll be like, okay. And light back off, it'll do it again. And I'm like, I'm going to stop paying attention to you so you stop.
Do you feel anything moving? Like, do you feel like
no.
Bed sheets? Nothing? It's just the sound?
Just the sound. It doesn't sound like it's happening on the bed. It sounds like it's happening in the other part, the other side of the room.
Pants or rubbing together or something?
Right.
Or, yeah.
It could be pants. I hadn't really thought about
that. Like how sometimes people make that swishy sound when they're walking?
It's not regular. It's like it'll happen like once. So it's not like a footstep type of thing. It's just like a shift. Like something was moved. And it's like maybe a blanket sitting on the other side of the room was moved, And it's like, what? Why does that keep happening? You know?
Obviously, it's a ghost with a sheet over its head.
Oh my God, you solved it. I hadn't even thought of that.
Brilliant.
So that's what they sound like.
Do any of your
Okay.
sheets have eye holes cut in them? Have you noticed any?
Now I'm going to have to go check.
It's the sheet ghost.
The thing that always gets me is when you have those hypnagogic things. It's kind of like, was it something, or was it because I was starting to fall asleep?
Right.
You know. And it's like the only one that stands out to me was as I was falling asleep. I don't even know if I think maybe I had just woken up. I think I just randomly woke up, and I heard like a screech and a loud bang. And I kind of just sat bolt upright, and I went, okay, that was probably in my head. And then my dog went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why is the dog barking? The dog doesn't bark for nothing. And so I went into the other side of the house where my mom was, and I said, did you hear anything? And she's like, what? No. And I'm like, why is the dog barking? And she's like, I have no idea. He just got really upset and started barking like he heard something. And I'm going, okay. That's weird.
Extrasensory.
Yeah.
Well,
But is it like, is it timing? Did I pick up on something that translated as a screech and knock? I know somebody, when I told the story before, suggested it was Bigfoot knocking on the wall.
It's always Bigfoot.
always
Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Ooh,
could be.
I've got another
It
book
makes
to
you-
write.
If we don't know what it is, we can't say what it's not. That's the thing.
Right.
You know, I've had a number of people suggest that the invisible thing I encountered on the cliff that day, which was a daytime thing where it was shaking the tree and everything, was a Bigfoot that was invisible. And I thought, that never crossed my mind because I don't really think like that about Bigfoot. But I'm thinking I can't say it's not because I don't know what it was.
Right.
What if you create, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like a tulpa. What if you're creating something
Oh, yeah.
that does, like, what if our minds are, it's all like a product of a being that we're creating unconsciously. I mean,
Yep,
you never know.
Oh yeah.
Josh and I did a pretty, was it Josh and I? No, it was you, wasn't it?
It was.
That we did with David
Yeah.
Weatherly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. A whole show on tulpas.
With who? With David Weatherly?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
David wrote an article in Tulpas for the new Stone Breath album.
Hey, really? Who's Stone Breath?
That's this folk music band. I don't know. They do music for Strange Familiars.
I see. Would you happen to have some part in that?
Yeah. A little bit. just for the last 30 years of my life or so.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
So it's a new thing.
New thing.
He wrote. So I haven't actually. I know you sent it to me, and by the way, it looks beautiful.
Thank you.
You have some amazing packaging for what's the name of the album?
Witch Tree Prophets.
Oh.
And you have a booklet here. Tell people about the booklet.
Oh, it's 30 pages. It's got all the lyrics for the songs. It's got a bunch of illustrations.
Awesome artwork.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a bunch of illustrations I did specifically for the album, and then it's got 2 essays. One from me, which is about the witch tree, which is this sort of local legend from my neighborhood growing up, and one from David about tulpas.
So people should definitely check that out. Like I said, the packaging is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Where can people get that, by the way?
Stonebreath.bandcamp.com.
Okay, cool. And I assume they have to order. Do they have to order the physical to get the booklet?
Yeah. That's the only way to get the booklet. You can get the album on Amazon. You can get the album digitally, but the only way to get the booklet is to get it directly from us.
Cool. And we're gonna do a short Patreon thing at some point talking about that witch tree story, aren't we?
Yeah.
Ah, excellent. I forgot where were we before we stone breathed off to the side?
Sorry
I'm
about that.
still
Tulpas.
awake. I'm still awake over here.
Tulpas.
We were at Tulpas. And David Weatherly.
Yes. And that's it. I mean, a lot of this stuff could be projected from us. I mean, I don't like anytime stuff. I've had poltergeist stuff happen, and I'm just kind of like I look at it like it's something external, but not because I believe it's external. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like I'll treat it as external because I don't have any control if it is me, you know. So like, what am I trying to tell myself? What is it trying to tell me? What's going on? Okay, you know. Now let's move forward. Like the voice, you know. Like what was the shh? Was that just nothing? Was it nonsense? Was it noise? Or was there some specific reason I should get up? Because although I didn't actually believe there was someone in the house, if someone broke into the house with someone else, they might turn around and go, shh, because they made too much noise, and I would be like, wait.
Yeah.
Shh. It's like that was a reasonable thing that I think I should probably check on.
Well, the thing about tulpas that always fascinated me was they sort of feed on your energy.
Yeah.
That's how they're created, but then they almost take on an identity of their own, like independent from you. So then you almost have no control over what they could possibly do.
And that brings in the whole question of consciousness. Like, what is consciousness? Are these things distinctly conscious, or is it an illusion of consciousness and an illusion of independence?
But it's like, it's an illusion of independence, but it's almost like, can we create a conscious, like, are we like creators of consciousness that then become their own independence? Like, it's.
Are we sort of using our own energy to create a vehicle something else can then inhabit?
Yeah, exactly.
And if it doesn't get paid attention to, does it eventually just dissipate?
Well, yeah, that's the part too, is it almost like you can create something, but it needs other energies to feed into it. That was the other element as well. Very good.
It needs attention.
Yeah. It's like Donald Trump.
Out of left field, but accurate.
Exactly. I'm sorry. Yeah, it definitely needs like an energy to feed it. So it's kind of parasitical in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
mean,
go ahead.
No, go.
No. You go ahead. I'm good.
I've already forgot what I was
Me
saying.
too.
Go.
We canceled each other
All
out.
right,
You
go ahead, Jim.
I find it no less fascinating if these are, say, you know, real creatures or real ghosts or, you know, real I'm so done with the nuts and bolts craft thing, but let's say, for instance, real craft, real beings from other planets. It's no less interesting if they are all projections of the unconscious to me. I think it's incredibly interesting either way. Possibly more so if it has to do with the collective unconscious and projecting.
I think that some of it is. I also suspect that there is an other out there.
Yes.
And I think that other has been here with us the whole time, and it's trying to communicate. It's probably like us trying to communicate with a cat or a dog. We get a little bit of it, but we're not on the same level. Like,
right.
There's no fully mutual understanding there. It may seem like there is occasionally, but it's from a completely different perspective.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think sometimes those things manifest as plasma. I think that they, whether or not that is their form or they can manifest through it. And I think that's a lot of times what you get with the lights and UFO things, because they behave like they're intelligent.
Yes.
And I've also heard stories about crop circles with, you know, these little orbs of self-illuminating lights in them and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, is this, I mean, you could call it a nature spirit, you could call it whatever, but it's just something I think that is here with us that we can't directly just dial up and have a conversation with.
One of the most interesting things I ever heard about the crop circles was the people who were who were, admittedly going out and making them, but they said they would run into the weirdest stuff when they were out there making them.
I'm glad you said
Or they
that because I was about to say, like, I've talked and read about people who create them, but so I'm glad you actually said that because that put it in a different perspective for me.
Yes, yeah. I would say most crop circles are probably created by people,
Mhm.
but the people creating them have had, like, there was a guy who woke up one day with this sudden inspiration that he had to go out and create this symbol in the crops. And I forget exactly what, I think the story was that he made the symbol, and then it turned out it connected to another symbol someone was making in the field right across from where he was, and he had no idea there was someone there. And that person said, I don't know, I just got this sudden urge to come out here and make this circle.
Wow.
So it's like something like almost inspiring them and commanding them outside of their own awareness.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
having people come up with like new geometric theorems based on crop circles and stuff too. I mean, there's something to it. Even if it's all man-made, there's just something weird, woven into it.
Now, I'm not a professional on crop circles. I know a lot of them happen in the United Kingdom. Is there crop circles elsewhere?
Yeah.
Other than the United Kingdom, or is that like the hot spot?
That is definitely the hot spot.
that seems to be like where it's reached its highest art form. I mean, they do some incredible stuff. Whoever the they is, but it's.
I mean, because whenever someone says crop circles, I think England right away.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there was crop circles somewhere else, or if just the English were really.
Now you'll get a few a year that pop up in the United States, but they don't tend to be as grand as those, the ones in the UK.
They tend to be just circles, and I would say if any of them are a legitimate paranormal type of creation, it's the ones that are just circles.
I mean, you would think that England, being such a smaller landmass, would have a bigger, how can they conceal that somebody's making a crop circle? You think that would be easier in America or in the prairies or somewhere like that to make a crop circle and not get discovered. And
farmers are armed here.
Maybe they would be all into it, or maybe it's because we're so dispersed, the populations are spread out more because we have a landmass, and the population over in England is more condensed. So they're just running around making crop circles like crazy. I don't know, but you would think they would get caught at some point by a camera or a drone camera or something.
I think they have been.
Have they?
Yeah, I'm sure they have.
Yeah, because I would find it hard to believe that they wouldn't be caught on camera at some point.
But also I think there are different property laws. In United States and the UK as well, that I think figures into that a little bit. And
right.
I wasn't joking when I said people are armed here. It's
No, they are.
Yeah.
If someone's out messing around in their field, they're liable to get shot.
Yeah, you might get a back end full of buckshot or something.
Yeah.
So these people with guns are sort of repressing artistic expression in the crops.
Well, it's funny that the two guys who initially admitted to making the crop circles, who were admitting to making way more than they possibly could have with the number that were popping up, but when they said to them, well, where did you come up with this idea? And they said, well, the crop circles that popped up in Australia, they were called saucer nests.
Mm-hmm.
And down in Australia, especially, they would get these circular formations in reeds in some of the small, like along the coast and stuff like that, and no one has any explanation for them because they were laid out very much like crop circles. They were intertwined crops, and they were just these circular patches that didn't seem to have any natural explanation, but so people just assumed, well, that's where saucers land.
And there's woodcuts going back to the 1600s. I have one somewhere. They called it the mowing devil, and it shows a little devil with a scythe and a circle in the wheat or rye or whatever crop it was. I forget. But it's just been happening forever.
That's interesting.
And of course, farmers don't like them because they ruin the crops. But they especially ruin the crops when they have sightseers.
Right.
So how many things out there go unnoticed because the farmer goes, I'm mowing that
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
practicality.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, again, you could have something trying to communicate to us through this symbolism. I mean, if we're going to communicate with something so completely different from us, I'm thinking it's going to be psychic. It's going to be symbolism,
Metaphor.
and it's not.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's not. It's not going to be in any possible way direct. And even if that something is our unconscious, again, it works on. Our subconscious works in symbols.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Even in your dream, in your dreams. I mean, things aren't literal necessarily. I've had dreams that I've, looked at them and went, well, what does that mean? And it became quite clear, but it was so symbolic. And so all
Yeah.
these things are, just so, it's like a stamp that's saying, read me, but it's not doing it alphabetical like a story verbatim.
Right. You're getting little pieces and impressions, and it's like, okay, well, what is it trying to say? And is it just messing with us?
Oh boy, I hope not. Please, not.
Are they somewhere going, watch this?
Well, I mean, why is fear so big a part of this? I mean, with ghosts, with the cryptid sightings, with UFOs, often people will report this intense fear. It seems to be, if they're trying to communicate something, they're either failing miserably in that department, or they're trying to communicate fear for some reason.
It's possible that there's some form of life out there that feeds on that type of energy. And it's kind of what Ren and myself and Richmond were talking about. Like, there could be entities out there that need us, in a sense.
Right.
That are like parasites.
Topaz. Kidding.
A different type of parasite, though. Something that,
yeah.
like, because there's phenomena like with the UFO thing, especially when you have personal encounters that really resemble more shamanic awakenings. And I think how you approach it affects how it seems, whether it becomes a negative thing or a positive thing, or, and how it's utilized. But if you have like the black-eyed kids, you don't hear about like people encountering the black-eyed kids and being like, I'm now enlightened from my encounter with the black-eyed kids. They're like, oh my God, I'm terrified for everything.
Yeah.
So it could be that whatever's creating that phenomena literally just feeds off the fear, which some people would then say, well, that's a demon. But that's, a matter of, what words you want to use.
Yeah. They're all demons.
And then I've heard of it's like a vibration where they are. Like they're at a point where that's how they exist, is
Right.
going after that. And so it's impossible. That's just how they came to be. And so why not? Why wouldn't they feed off of fear? I think it's an easier emotion to trigger than some other emotions that might be harder to access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all energy.
Yeah.
So if something feeds off energy that we give off, and it realizes, ooh, if I do this, that thing gives off lots of yummy energy,
Yeah, and it does so much more faster than if I say, like, it's harder to get to feelings of hope and I'm going to do this. It's easier to trigger someone into fear, I think, because I think humans sort of react instinctively to, preserve themselves. And if you show fear, they immediately kick off and want to get away from it. But if you show hope, they are happy, something happy. They're like, oh, that's nice, So it's like, what will get the most response right away? Something scary, something that will trigger a whole bunch of energy, and they'll start moving away from it. Mm-hmm.
And it may not even be an intelligent decision.
Mm-hmm.
It may be, like nature, it may just realize that this is what gets them the most energy. So this is what they do. They're not thinking, ooh, I'm going to scare this person. It's just, that's the characteristic that manifests so that it can pull that energy.
Yeah.
It could be completely blind to what's going on, just a force of nature.
Yeah, instinctual.
But, all right. I think this is a good place to end. I know you've been up a very long time, Melissa.
I have, but ironically, I didn't think I could last this long, but I was, the conversation sort of, brightened my brain a bit, for lack of words. Maybe not. I'm lacking words, so maybe I should go to bed.
Well, sometimes lacking words after a good conversation is a sign that it was a good conversation.
Perfect.
Where can people find you online?
Well, graphic design wise, I'm at www.mdmcreate.weebly.com. The Folklore podcast is www.thefolklorepodcast.com. And of course, The Curious 14 that I write with Matt Cook and Andrew Gable and a few others is www.thecurious14.com. So those are 3 different places. And of course, I'm on Facebook as Melissa Martell or MDM Create.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me.
And Tim, people, of course, can find you where?
Strangefamiliars.com.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
It was great to be back.